From Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, Pat Buchanan. Tonight, Drug Use 101. In the Crossfire, New York Representative Charles Rangel, chairman of the House Narcotics Abuse and Control Committee, and Stanford University lecturer Stuart Regis.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. Stuart Regis, age 32, is a popular teacher of computer sciences at Stanford University. He's also a crusader for legalization of drugs. 4 weeks ago, he wrote a letter to the new national drug czar, Bob Martinez, announcing, quote, "I disagree with the government's anti-drug campaign, and I am doing everything I can to make fools of you." He told Martinez he uses drugs, carries them in his backpack while on campus, and advises students about drug use. Martinez read the letter and wrote a letter of his own to Stanford President Donald Kennedy. "Get rid of this bird or lose your federal funding," a cool $120 million last year. Mr. Regis is now on paid administrative leave while Stanford decides what to do. Mr. Regis was asking for trouble, and now he's got it. But at least he gets the psychedelic experience of being on Crossfire, as does Bob Novak, who's sitting in for Pat. Bob?
Mr. Regis, the parents who send their children to Stanford at a tremendous amount of money, I think they expect some guidance from the faculty. Do you think it is fair to counsel young people to use drugs?
Well, a couple answers to that question. This case is actually the government trying to counsel and not Stanford or the parents of Stanford students counseling. This is an issue of government interference, for one thing. The second answer I would have is that if those parents expect to be able to control what opinions are expressed on campus, then they shouldn't be sending their children to a university because they don't know what a university is about.
In other words, when they pay that $20,000 and they send them to Stanford, they may think that the kid asked their instructor, and you call yourself a popular instructor, so I suppose you are,
yeah.
And they say, "Mr. Regis, is it okay if I use MDA?" And you say, "Won't harm you." Do you think that that is fair to those kids or to their parents?
Okay, well, let's actually talk about this issue of kids, because I think actually one of the things we're debating here is the question of what to think about these college-age students. I tend to think that what the parents send us are kids, in fact, coming out of high school, but they leave young adults. I think these people learn to make their own choices while at Stanford, and I think that the faculty at Stanford should give their honest advice to those students, even if that advice is unpopular.
I want to get one thing straight. On this network, on another program over the weekend, I said you had counseled the use of LSD. I was in error on that. But is there much difference? They're both illegal controlled substances, MDA, which you counsel the use of, and LSD. Isn't that correct?
There's a major difference between the two drugs. In fact, an interesting thing is that this student had experimented with LSD before. LSD is a drug that can have significant loss of control. And so, in fact, I counsel people away from LSD unless they're very careful about how they use it.
Unless they're careful. So you say if they're careful, they can use it.
I believe there is such a thing as responsible drug use, and I think that under the right circumstances, it can be reasonable for people to experiment with LSD.
So I wasn't so far off when I said that you did, even though I was in error and I thought it was LSD, that you have counseled people to use LSD.
No, in fact, I've never counseled a student to use LSD.
I thought you just said unless.
We're just counseling you to use LSD, Bob. That's the point.
I said that I didn't think it was inappropriate advice.
Charlie Rangel, all this guy did was write a letter. How can the government come down on him like a ton of bricks? You know, as a former prosecutor, he couldn't be prosecuted in any court in this country for sending a letter to Bob Martinez. How can the government come to Stanford and say, fire this guy or else?
No one's prosecuting him for sending a letter. It was a dumb thing to do. He wanted some attention. Obviously, he's got it, and he has to take the heat. I think he's got a pretty good deal to be on leave with pay. It's like a paid vacation. But one thing is abundantly clear. When you advise people to break the law, and especially to abuse drugs, whether it's alcohol or MDA or any other type of drug, and encourage them to do this, then you have to take the heat, and the heat means your job. If you want to do it in the street, take the risk and lose your job and do it. But don't put the institution at risk, and don't put those youngsters at risk, especially if you're so-called popular.
But just to straighten things out, Bob Martinez, the drug czar, does not want Mr. Regis to be on administrative leave. He wants him out on his rear end.
No one cares about this, Stuart. The question is the university going to allow senior lecturers and professors to advocate, to encourage, and to talk about their personal spiritual experiences with drugs.
Now, wait a minute.
So he did it.
As I understand this, and maybe Mr. Regis can correct me if I'm wrong, he is not proselytizing for drug use. He is there, he is a human being, he is a person in the Stanford community. If a student comes in and says, I want your opinion on are drugs harmful?
Well, suppose the student...
doesn't he have the right to give his honest opinion?
Suppose the student came and said...
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Suppose the student came and said that I believe if I go on a date that I'm entitled to have sex with the girl, and she calls it rape, it's not rape if I spend some money. And so I'm asking you, Stuart, you are older, you're much more experienced, you know, do you consider that rape? Of course not. Intellectually, the way I look at it, it's a spiritual experience. And so he could advocate that the person violate the law.
That's a good question. Why don't you handle that one?
I think that there is no objective criterion that you can really give that doesn't allow for abuse of such a policy. Basically, I think it's impossible for you to distinguish between good advice and bad advice. In the 50s, it would have been good advice to have fired communists. A long time ago, it would have been good advice to fire atheists. I think that if you allow popular opinion to decide such things, you'll end up firing people for bad reasons.
Atheism is not against the law, but
let's talk about the law, actually. I've been driving around the nation's capital all day today, and a lot of people have been beeping at me and swearing at me because I've been driving the speed limit and because I've been paying attention to signs that say no turn on red. These people, in essence, have been trying to encourage me to break the laws that they want to break. But I think that Congressman Rangel's been in Washington too long. I think that he's forgotten that Americans reserve the right to be critical of their government.
You sound like
we
Bob.
expect governments to make mistakes,
like
and we reserve the right to disobey laws and to talk about the fact that we disobey laws.
At the expense of the student and the university. You want to obey the law because I heard you earlier today kind of classing yourself as a civil rights activist when you were talking about Rosa Parks. If you want to do it, more power to you. Go to the police station, use your drugs, and see what happens to you.
But that's not what I'm fighting here. Okay,
no, what I'm fighting, you're jeopardizing federal funds to the university. You're jeopardizing the prestige and integrity of the university. But more importantly than that, those youngsters are placed in your custody. They expect a certain minimum standard of behavior.
This is exactly,
and you're violating that trust.
Don't they expect he is not there to be their moral guidance, but don't they expect these youngsters at Stanford, as you call them, that their professors will tell them the truth, tell them what they really think as best they know it?
And tell them not to violate the law.
Help them to learn to make their own choices about what laws they will or will not violate.
Let me back up a minute,
That's
because
not right.
the formulation that you and Mike have made, I don't think jives with what I have read about your activities. The way you and Mike are talking about it, you're a totally neutral figure, and if somebody comes up to you and said, Mr. Regis, what should I do? You tell them. But I get the idea you are much more active than that. When you talk about going to the dinners with the students, you are, now this is not in the classroom, but it is in a university setting, you are taking a proactive position on the question of drug use. You know, you're not just passive and saying, I want to talk about baseball, but if you insist on talking about drugs, I'll give you some advice.
I think that what's really happening here is that the government is waging a propaganda war on drugs, and as a result, people have a very one-sided view. One of the things I've noticed in talking to freshmen, for example,
well, I would like you to answer my question, because you're making a little speech about something else, I'd like you to answer my question.
I have never advocated that everyone should do drugs. I have never been a general advocate that people should do drugs. There are many people who probably should not do drugs.
But I wish you would answer my question, and I know you're a college instructor and you know the meanings of words. Okay, are you taking an active position in favor of drug use? I'm not saying that you say everybody should use it, but you are not taking a passive position. You are taking an active position, are you not?
What I've done, and you can decide if this is an answer to your question, I have explained my own life experience to students, and I think that's the most that I can do. I can't make the choices for those students, and I have said that drugs have been a positive experience in my own life.
So you're an active proselytizer then.
No, I'm standing up as a role model of a responsible drug
there
use.
There it is.
So wait, Charlie, do you doubt?
An ending to this, and that is, and you also write articles for the students to read, where you glamorize memorize, or at least say that intellectually and spiritually that you have enjoyed it, so that if a youngster really admires and respects you because of the high esteem which you held in your particular profession, and would want to emulate you, and was impressionable, even though drug use is going down in college, you would tell him that it may be a pretty good thing for him to try drugs, wouldn't you?
Can I say something? You interrupted me earlier. You didn't let me.
This is Ted Turner interrupting you now. Go ahead, Bob.
We're going to have to take a break, and when we return, we will look at the question of whether there should be a safe haven for drugs on the elite college campuses while the feds crack down in the Black Ghetto.
Crossfire is brought to you by American Forest Council, managing the future of America's forests.
It began with a vision that balances our need for wood with our need for wilderness, our need for paper with our need for clean air and clean water. That's why the country's best-known forest products companies joined together to pursue that vision, to look for answers that seek common ground, answers that focus on the best possible way to protect the future of America's forests. The American Forest Council.
No matter how good you feel, you can still benefit from whole grain nutrition. But of these leading cereals, only Wheaties is made with 100% whole grain. So no matter what you're shooting for, better get your whole grain.
I bet eat my Wheaties.
Up to $5 back on 2 Michael Jordan videos. See package for details.
Sure, I care about this yard, but I care about my family even more. And that's why I only trust Ortho products. If I'm having trouble with the bugs, or there are weeds I need to get rid of, there's always an Ortho product to do the job perfectly. But best of all, Ortho products are so carefully made. They leave the yard looking beautiful, and us feeling comfortable. You're definitely better off with Ortho.
Recession, unemployment, tight credit. Just how sick is the U.S. economy? And is there a cure? A fiscal forecast and how you may be affected on Cryer & Company tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. Eastern on CNN.
Welcome back to Crossfire. Stanford University did not suspend faculty member Stuart Regis because of his views on drugs until the federal government threatened to cut off money to the school. Money surely talks. But is this big brother bullying the campus? We're talking about it with Congressman Charlie Rangel, who heads the House Select Committee on Narcotics Abuse and Control, and with Mr. Regis, who is a senior lecturer in the Stanford Department of Computer Science, currently suspended with pay. Mr. Regis, let me see if I can get your situation correctly. Stanford University is getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government, and you want this to be a haven for drugs, while in Mr. Rangel's district in Harlem, the feds crack down. Is that correct?
Let me answer your question. Let me also try to make the point that I was making earlier. I think if I'm going to be fired, you should at least let me explain my point of view. The point I was going to make earlier is that I've actually found it rather disturbing in talking to freshman dorms. I've been doing that a lot in the past week and a half, to find that these students, over 90% of them, expect to be experimenting with alcohol to the point of getting drunk and losing consciousness. Yet these students are disturbed about the idea of experimenting with a drug like MDA. In essence, what I'm trying to do is to tell the other side of what I think the drug story is. I think it's very frightening that these students are so casual about the idea of using alcohol. I think that to win the war on drugs, in essence, we're creating a generation of alcoholics, and it's not clear to me that that's a victory.
We did try prohibition for a number of years, and just because that didn't work, I'm not sure we should legalize drugs. But I want to ask.
I'd much rather have them experimenting with MDA than with alcohol. Okay, let's take your question.
The question that is the law, and you are not merely saying MDA is good. You're saying MDA is as illegal as LSD is, and I just want to know if you think this should be a safe haven while you're cracking down in the ghettos.
I've never recommended that. I've never said that I should be above the law. If you want to take me to court, give me my day in court and convict me, that's one thing. I think that if Stanford were going to fire me after such a conviction, that would make sense. I wouldn't disagree with that. But what's happening here is that the government knows they can't get me in a court of law for what I've done because, thank goodness, it's not illegal in this country to talk about breaking laws. And so the government is asking Stanford to punish me because they cannot.
How about the possession of drugs? Isn't that illegal?
It is illegal, but saying that you possess drugs is not illegal in this country.
All right, Charlie, now, Mr. Regis says he tells students that drugs have been a positive experience for him. Now, I have a couple questions for you about that. It is a sort of cliche of the drug war that drugs can't be a positive experience for anyone. Do you doubt that Mr. Regis is telling the truth, that he is perfectly capable of using drugs and teaching computer sciences and leading a reasonably normal life without any detriment to himself? And number two, given that, if that's true, should he lie when these students ask him, have this been a positive experience?
First of all, we're not here believing that students are rushing to him, asking him about his different experiences, either in his sex life or with drugs or anything like that. He writes, he's an advocate, and he is creating a glamorous situation for people to use drugs.
He says he's used drugs, and it's been good for him, not bad for him.
But he's not sitting.
Do you accept that that might be true? Do you accept,
sure.
And it might be true for many people.
He might drop dead tomorrow, too, from it. But I'm saying that those kids are held in trust to the faculty and their parents put him there,
Charlie,
not to learn about his experiences.
Let's forget about whether he's advocated. Suppose a kid actually does come to Stewart and say to him, were drugs a positive experience in your life? Should Stewart lie to him?
That's so artificial.
He should say it was a positive experience for me, but it's against the law. And you could get kicked out of this school, and you could go to jail for doing it.
Let's Stewart in.
What he's saying, basically, is that there is an objective truth here, and that he thinks that it should not be stated at a university, that a university staff member should not be able to state what he sees as an objective truth. That's a scary, scary thing.
I'm saying that you're encouraging kids to violate the law and to abuse drugs and to...
I'm telling students the other side of the drug story and letting them make their own choices. You're the one that wants to make the choices for these students, not me.
The fact that some of them are alcoholics doesn't mean that you encourage them to use alternative drugs. Is any better.
Mr. Regis, you had one of your colleagues who was an alcoholic and said, you know, it ain't bad being an alcoholic. I have had some really good times. I've had some good sex and good fun, and I go to work every day. And that is not even against the law. Would you say that's okay for him to tell the kids, go ahead and drink as much as you can?
I am a very strong free speech advocate. I agree with Thomas Jefferson that if you believe that somebody is spreading something that is not truth, the best way to fight that person is to fight it with truth.
So that's acceptable behavior in a faculty member.
For an alcoholic,
as long as it doesn't interfere with their professional responsibilities, it is acceptable for a faculty member to speak their mind and to say what they truthfully believe.
That's the case. That what we're saying is that the federal government should not subsidize an institution where its faculty members are advising the students or encouraging the students to do things that for most of the population it is dangerous and it's illegal. And an alcoholic, I think, is a point, because most alcoholics deny that they are alcoholics. And what he is saying is that if you found faculty members that were abusing alcohol and the student says, do you find this an exciting experience? He says, yes, for me, it's a great lifestyle and you ought to try it.
If he's being honest, that's okay. What you're trying to do is to purge the faculty and staff of people who express opinions that you disagree with.
Isn't what he's trying to do is trying to say that this is a situation where you have young, impressionable people, and people like you, sir, are a menace to the way they develop?
These young people are going to have to make choices at some point in their life. If they don't get to hear this side of the story from me while they're at college, they'll hear it when they leave college. These people are young adults. They need to learn to make their own decisions. They need to learn how to deal with advice.
Okay, we have to take another break. When we come back, we're going to ask Mr. Regis if he's not kidding himself and that he's actually addicted.
America uses more things produced from oil than any other country in the world. produces more domestic oil than any other company in America. BP.
I always carry my Lanier Pocket Protege so I can record my ideas anywhere. Because I get some of my best ideas in showers.
Call 1-800-241-1706.
Two foursomes can use Lanier's new digital dictation system, so you can save your company over $15,000 a year in executive time. That's a lot of golf balls.
But it doesn't cost a lot of golf balls.
If I were going to create the perfect place, I'd start with the north. I would carve out rivers and rolling hills, then ride the moon south and warm the skies with a tropical sun. I would dot the west with little hometowns and fill the east with excitement. Right in the middle, I'd put a great big playground. I would surround it all with water, from coast to coast to coast. And I'd give it a name, Florida.
Butter? Billy.
Thank you.
Looks good, doesn't it? Ounce for ounce, Philly cream cheese has half the calories of butter or margarine. Next time, butter your bread with Philly instead.
Next in consumer news, California.
When you need the latest business and financial news, turn to CNN Headline News at 15 and 45 minutes after every hour. Dollars and cents on CNN Headline News.
Stewart, Charlie Rangel points out that a lot of alcoholics deny that they're addicted to alcohol. How do you know that's not the case for yourself? Tallulah Bankhead, the actress, once said about cocaine, "Of course it's not addictive, darling. I use it all the time." That's sort of what you're saying, isn't it?
Well, for one thing, I've actually been relatively careful about addictive substances in my own life. I actually tend to shy away from the addictive substances. But I've gone entire weeks, months, years without doing certain substances. And I know that there is no one substance that I'm addicted to.
Mr. Congressman Rangel, as a matter of federal policy, if Stanford University, I mean, they can't keep Mr. Regis on payroll doing nothing forever. If they don't can him, they don't fire him, and he's obviously not going to recant, should the government stop paying him $100 million a year?
There's no question in my mind that the federal government should want to have an atmosphere where students can learn how to live a lawful and clean life. And if we have instructors that are sharing the worst part of their experiences with the students and writing...
who disagree with Charlie Rangel.
No. Writing articles.
Exactly.
No,
That's
but the
what
law
we're
is
talking
the
about.
law. I do write the law, but I mean, I don't sign it into law.
Do you ever break the speed limit? Do you ever break any laws?
Mr. Regis.
Well, I don't jeopardize a whole bunch of students that I'm endeared to as you are.
Mr. Regis, when you wrote that letter to Mr. Martinez, did you really think you were going to set this up, that you were going to get in danger of losing your job, that you were going to become a national figure? Did you think you were having some fun and games with the feds?
I expected them to ignore what I was doing, but I figured that if I could be fired for what I'm doing, it was worth being fired for what I'm doing, to try to point out the fact that the war on drugs has gone too far. The government is interfering with too many of our liberties.
Charlie Rangel, Mr. Regis's drug of choice is something called MDA. Now, he says the most dangerous thing that can happen to you under NDA is you might hug or kiss someone. Just a point of information, is that wrong?
I have no idea as to what the experience he's had with any number of drugs, which
well, look,
obviously
you more than anyone else make drug policy in this country. If there's something wrong with MDA, if there is, it's illegal. People's lives are being changed. They're being arrested for using it. You ought to know whether there's something wrong with it or not.
Well, certainly not with his experience. Doctors have proven and convinced the Congress that this is a dangerous drug.
What's dangerous about it? What's dangerous about it, Charlie?
I don't know the personal effects. You can get involved with cocaine and crack. Obviously, everyone is using it, and it has caused
harm. So you have no idea what's wrong with MDA.
I'm saying that the doctors have indicated that it's dangerous. They say that smoking is dangerous to your health. Now, he may smoke, and he may not think it's dangerous. He may enjoy it. But if he was advocating smoking to kids who didn't smoke, I would say that would be wrong, too.
Stanford should lose $120 million unless they fire him.
Well, he should care enough about Stanford that he shouldn't jeopardize those grants to Stanford.
Oh, I'm not jeopardizing the grants. Stanford always has the option of firing me. I've always assumed all along
put him in that position, and needless should you put the kids in the position to be exposed to dangerous practices.
These people have to learn to make their own choices, and if I'm putting them in the position of learning how to make choices, that's a good thing.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mr. Regis. Thank you, Congressman Rangel. Bob and I will smoke a little bit in a minute.
I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. Coming up on Prime News, Iraq may have hidden away enough uranium during the Gulf War to build a nuclear device. A powerful cyclone leaves thousands dead and tens of thousands missing in Bangladesh. And after a shaky start, the shuttle Discovery begins a series of dramatic space maneuvers. These stories and more coming up on Prime News.
It began with a vision. A vision that balances our need for wood with our need for wilderness, our need for paper with our need for clean air and clean water. That's why the country's best-known forest products companies joined together to pursue that vision, to look for answers that seek common ground, answers that focus on the best possible way to protect the future of America's forests. The American Forest Council.
I was ready for my vacation, but afraid of being locked into inflated rental car rates. Suddenly, everything fell into place.
Help you with that excess baggage?
Thanks, she's not with me.
I mean those inflated prices. Dollar Rent-A-Car is right on the airport, right on the money. Great selection, unlimited mileage. Call 1-800-800-4000.
Buongiorno. I'm in Italy enjoying one of the true specialties of Italian cuisine, the New York strip. Perfecto. Boy, feels like I'm in the USA. Beef, real food in Little Italy, New York.
I'm visiting my in-laws. I smoke. They don't. No bother. I've got Wrigley Spearmint Gum. That cool, clean taste is most inviting. When I can't smoke, I enjoy pure chewing satisfaction.
For a transcript, send $3 to Crossfire Transcripts, Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007, or call 212-227-READ.
Mike, I think we have had an example of corrupt elitism here, where you have an elite university, very high tuition, the kids go there, they are told by advocates of illegal drugs that it's okay, and you have this little enclave of corruption and illegal drug use while the feds are cracking down on the crack houses in the ghetto.
Why is it that you conservatives are so eager to get the government off of people's backs, except when it's something you're interested in, when you don't mind if they come down like a ton of bricks on people in the ghetto and on campus?
You like drugs?
From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire.
On the right, I'm Robert Novak. Join us again next time for another edition of Crossfire.
Coming up, Prime News, followed by Larry King Live here on CNN.
Okay, last time. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?